When the World War II was fought, it was said that it would be the war that ends all wars. But after the World War, we have seen many wars of a smaller scale, much more confined to different places in geography, but killing many people and causing chaos throughout the world. It must be noted that when the World War was fought, it was fundamentally an ethnic war within Europe, but the rest of the world was grafted into it. And the continent of Africa was no exception. The continent of Africa found herself in that situation because most of her people had been colonized, and they participated in the war, and they became part of the war and part of a new world order. Today, the creation of the United Nations notwithstanding, the United Nations having been created in 1945 in San Francisco, the United States of America, to be the body that will ensure that the world negotiates itself out of conflict. But that has not happened. In 1948, the world once again sat in Paris, France, to give birth to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It can't be argued that human rights have injected some kind of decency into human affairs, but that too has had its ups and downs. Once again, a year later, in 1949, in Geneva, Switzerland, the world sat down to bring into being what is called the law of war, to ensure that even in circumstances where war breaks out, it is prosecuted in a manner that is respectful of human beings and human affairs. But today, we find ourselves in a situation where the world is grappling with many issues which have affected peace. Conflict. In Europe, we have seen the breakup of the Soviet Union and the wars that took place thereafter. We saw the Spanish Civil War. In Asia, we saw the wars that took place in India immediately after independence between India and Pakistan. And in 1971, the war between Pakistan and Bangladesh. We have seen the Korean Wars of 1953. In the continent of Africa, we have also seen many wars in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Ethiopia, in Sudan, in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, in the Cameroons, in Central African Republic, in Libya, in Sudan, and we have, of course, seen wars being conducted in Latin America. In a nutshell, the world has seen many conflicts which have given birth to human suffering on a scale that was unprecedented, which then begs the question, how is the world going to immunize ourselves against war? The question that must be asked, is the United Nations capable of ensuring that we do not have war? Continentally, is the African Union capable of ensuring that we do not have war? And the answer is that we find ourselves in a very sorry situation. And the net effect of these is that we are seeing human suffering in proportions that were not contemplated at any one time, with refugees moving within continent, within Europe, within Africa, within Latin America, within Asia. We are seeing hunger in different parts of the world. And this is undermining development with the consequences that the promises we made to ourselves and that we have made to ourselves continentally within the continent of Africa and globally under the aegis of the United Nations, those promises are not being met. We will, for example, remember that we had the Millennium Development Goals. Most of them were not realized. We now have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and in many parts of the world, those are not being realized. In the continent of Africa, we have Africa Agenda 2063, and we are talking about Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But these are being undermined because of the headwinds that we are seeing in the conflict that have been generated. Today, a most unexpected conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Many commentators thought that it would be a short conflict, but 1 year down the line, the conflict continues, and it has affected the distribution of grain throughout the world. Many did not know that Ukraine was responsible for the production of grain in the manner that we now know. And it's not only grain that we are talking about. It has affected the supply of gas to Europe. It has affected the supply of petroleum to the rest of the world. And that has indeed undermined production and increased the cost of living. So that when we talk about the cost of living now, in the first quarter of the 21st century, it is a combination of factors which in itself is leading to a situation that is causing and creating an environment that breeds conflict, and conflict is continuing apace. In the continent of Africa, for example, in the year 2021, the African Union said that in order to grow, Africa must silence the guns. We thought we would, but we now know that it is not as easy as we thought it would be. And many young men and women in the continent of Africa are being victimized. Organizations are being formed which are breeding ground for mercenaries in the Sahelian region. We hear of Boko Haram, we hear of Al-Shabaab, and all these bodies. When you go to the Arab world, you hear of bodies such as Al-Qaeda, which have been operating in countries such as Iraq and in Afghanistan. We hear of the Taliban, and all these are armies that do not respond to a single chain of command. So that one can easily say that there is chaos in the world. Look at what is happening in Haiti, for example. Haiti has now become a haven for warlords, and it is an environment that is toxic, in an environment that is damaging to the futures of and livelihoods of young men and women, and the situation is dire. So in a nutshell, the world finds herself in a situation which she did not contemplate, particularly when we are talking about the 21st century, when we are also talking about the fourth industrial revolution and the fifth industrial revolution. It beggars belief that in an environment of profound enlightenment, we find ourselves in the most astounding primitivity of man's inhumanity to man.